Thank you, Ahmed, for the introduction. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us for this session. What a tremendous program at Sunnybrook, and I also want to thank if there are any sponsors out there of this program. It's just a tremendous program, and I'm really looking forward to a great discussion with everyone, and also with everyone gaining some practical experience in performing these kinds of assessments, because it really will go a long way to help position you well in the future, no matter what organizations you work for. As Ahmed mentioned, most of my career was spent at Amgen. I helped launch the company in 1991, the Canadian affiliate. And I stayed with this wonderful biotechnology company for just over 23 years, based here in Mississauga, Ontario. I went on from there to launch a sample digestion equipment company. We manufactured a laboratory instrument that dissolves solid material into a solution for multi-element analysis. And we are now a global company. I was the CEO for 6.5 years. And in July of last year, I made a big decision and I moved to chairman of the board. But I continue serving on that role very actively, and we are a growing global company. I have a lot of experience in strategic planning, new products commercialization, and project management, and how all of these critical functions come together to help achieve operational excellence in organizations. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you some best practices in this space. Product development and commercialization is a passion of mine, whether it's a biopharmaceutical or a medical device. And these tools that we're going to talk about today will help you serve in both of those markets, irrespective of where you will be in the future. So we're going to spend some time together today, and the goal, it really is, when you leave these sessions, you will learn some new skills to comprehensively research, analyze, and inform your organizational strategic direction within the marketplace. And we're going to focus on competitive analysis and market segmentation. Later, we will expand on why we chose these subject matters, but they're critical, and they play into a strategy. And without competitive analysis and without good market segmentation, you really have a lost strategy. And this is such an important area. But before we talk about competitive analysis and market segmentation, I'm going to provide a brief overview of our global healthcare environment, so we all have a shared understanding and the context of our current environment of our healthcare system globally, and how the delivery of healthcare is changing today. I find that this part of the presentation always primes everybody by really understanding our environment and also understanding how it is changing and where you may be in the future within this change. So we'll talk about that. So this is a snapshot of the agenda. We'll talk about the global healthcare environment, then the topic of innovation to commercialization more broadly. Then we'll do a deep dive on competitive analysis frameworks and market segmentation models. And we have a break, a half-hour break, and following the break, I will finalize the presentation with a brief overview of market analysis, and then we're going to do a workshop together. It's a half-hour workshop followed by a 15-minute discussion. And we're going to move quickly throughout this presentation. Please feel free to ask questions. I am always appreciate an engaging audience, but I will be managing time as well. So if I have to move forward, we can catch up to some of your questions in our discussion period towards the end of the presentation. So let's first talk about our global healthcare outlook. You know, each and every year, a number of large, well-known consulting organizations, whether it's McKinsey, BCG, or Deloitte, they develop kind of a forward-looking view of the healthcare environment. And I'm going to share with you the most recent report by Deloitte. I like the Deloitte forward-looking view of healthcare. I think they've done an excellent job over the last few years. They have been very accurate because I've been monitoring their predictions. And but more or less, what I'm going to share with you today from Deloitte is very similar to what some of the other major players are saying as well. Really, they start this report with a question, and that is the question is, are we finally seeing the long-promised transformation in healthcare? And has the pandemic accelerated that transformation as a catalyst? What we've seen is a global pandemic of historic proportions, exponential advances in medical science, an explosion of digital technologies, data access, and analytics. I'm going to talk about some of those. More informed and empowered consumers, and a greater focus on disease care, from disease care to prevention and well-being. And really all of these drivers of healthcare here has culminated together. And the pandemic has really been viewed as a catalyst to some major change. And let's talk about what some of those changes are in a moment. First, what have we observed with the pandemic? The cases have now climbed to just over 370 million globally, but there are still low vaccination rates in some regions. I just looked at the latest statistics today. About 40% of the global population has not even received one dose of the vaccine. So we still have major gaps in this vaccine rollout. And because of that, we've recognized the interconnectedness of our global populations. Just because we are vaccinated here doesn't necessarily protect us from new strains of the virus that may come from other regions of the world that may be less protected. So we are truly interconnected here, and healthcare workers also are experiencing incredible emotional, physical, and professional stress related to the impact of COVID-19. And we've also seen that the pandemic has also decreased access to some non-COVID-19 related medical care, which is a great concern to our community and to all of us today. So really a major impact globally with some really interesting observations. What is changing? Well, we've seen that shifting consumer preferences and behaviors. There's a greater, I think, integration of life sciences and healthcare, where we've witnessed a rapidly evolving digital health technologies. I'll share some examples with you. The new talent and care delivery models are emerging along with clinical innovation. And you know, how is it changing? We're still in an unfamiliar world of remote working and virtual doctor visits, but it's here and it's going to stay with us and it'll continue to grow. And we're still experiencing supply chain shortages of medical supplies, personnel, and services. We're elevating that human experience of the workforce and reshaping what are we doing, how are we doing it, and where is the work going to be performed. And I think we've all experienced how this has somewhat played out in the last 2 years, but there's going to be a continuing reshaping of this as we go forward in the future. And then finally, we're forming new partnerships to produce and procure desperately needed vaccines, treatments, and supplies, because I think we've hit some major milestones in some of our societies, but in others, we have just failed miserably. As I mentioned, 40% of our population has not received the first dose. So there still remains a long way to go to be able to address issues like global pandemics in the future, based on our various successes and failures and what we've learned from all of that. The Deloitte article is quite interesting. It more or less, the second half of the report, it's a 55-page report. It talks about the 6 areas of global healthcare that we're currently paying attention to, that you see here. Now, we don't have all the time today to talk about all of these 6 areas, but I will briefly touch on 2 of them, because all of you that are participating in this session this evening will perhaps in one way or another play a role in digital transformation and healthcare delivery convergence model, as well as the reshaping of medical science. And here's just a couple of examples. Well, first, in regards to digital transformation of our healthcare environment, we're going to see infrastructure changes, a lot of attention to infrastructure, as well as operational changes. So there will be more investing in 5G infrastructure, including in remote regions, move to contact centers to the cloud. From an operational perspective, virtual healthcare, I think, will be an integral delivery channel. We call this healthcare delivery without walls. And there will be a continued strengthening of interoperability and connectivity so that we can share data in the cloud and make good decisions for patients. And we'll continue to see a broadening of partnerships to address the many gaps that we still have in this changing healthcare environment and where we want to go. Here's a couple of examples on the future of medical science. I guess if you speak to anybody, they will have a different perspective on what the future of medical science will look like. But there is an agreement, generally speaking, that there will be great attention put on continued transformational innovations like digital medicine. It would include digital therapeutics, such as one company here, Applied VR, is an example of a company that uses digital therapeutics to treat patients with mental health issues, or patients that may be treated for PTSD, for example. Digital companions are a little bit different than digital therapeutics. Some examples are ProAir, DigiHaler, and Propeller Health. They have developed sensors, for example, in puffers that are used to treat people with lung disease. And these sensors allows you to upload information into the cloud so we can track patients prospectively and manage patients in a way that we have never seen before. In fact, most of the inhaler companies are partnering with these companies because it has given them a competitive advantage in how their customers are being treated and managed by healthcare practitioners. Nanomedicine, genomics, artificial intelligence, and big data. We've talked about it a lot. You're going to continue hearing more and more about this, as well as microbiometrics and metabolomics. Company called Viome Zoe, they are developing ways in which we can prevent disease through nutrition rather than treating disease. So this is an example of managing our globe through preventative care. Major hurdles still exist: cost, scale, and trust. And there's a number of areas of focus that our healthcare industry is putting attention on, tapping into consumer empowerment, establishing health system innovation hubs, and exploring collaborative funding and development models. Very, very exciting. here is the last slide on this global change. And I attended a presentation by IQVIA, or some people call it IQVIA. They are experts in market access for biopharmaceuticals around the world. What they have shown here is the change that they observed in the US marketplace. You're seeing things like 2,900% growth in telehealth claims, 2021 compared to 19. They raised 15 billion for telemed platforms in just the first half of 2021. 38 states have expanded telehealth coverage, and 29 billion was raised for digital health funding in 2021, which is more than 2 times that was raised in 2020. And overall, you're seeing a huge shift from hospital-centric interventions to consumer-centric interventions. And it's really exciting to see how this is playing out. And it's exciting to see how these innovations and organizations and change has really catapulted in the last 2 years while we have endured this pandemic. So that's more or less just a snapshot on how our healthcare environment is changing. And a lot of you are working on various projects that examines perhaps an innovation and an effort to develop a product and to commercialize your innovation so that you can impact patients worldwide. A really, really exciting time to play a role in medical device or biopharmaceutical product development and commercialization. Speaking of commercialization, this is just an illustration that shows that commercialization, whether it's medical device or biopharmaceutical or other segments of the healthcare industry and the life science industry, it generally evolves from some kind of an idea or market need to the development of a product. And parallel to this product development process, there are a number of disciplines that are required to develop an overall success of a product. We have knowledge management, research and discovery, intellectual property management. There's product development processes, as well as something called the development of a target product profile and how you use that to manage your product development processes. There's regulatory requirements and commercialization processes. We just don't have the time today to delve in each and every one of these facets of product development and commercialization. We can spend weeks and months doing that, but today we're going to focus a little bit more on commercialization and how that dovetails into various disciplines of competitive analysis and market segmentation, and how that plays into commercialization. Just want to share with you, just to prime you a little bit, what happens in medical device product development and commercialization. This is just an illustration of shows you the many activities that are involved. It is oversimplified and it is high level, but it gives you a sense of what's going on. You have management oversight, where management defines the strategies, the portfolios, the roadmaps and resources that you work with in most life science companies. You may have an idea could be selected, and it enters a process of product development at a very early stage. And here we need to understand, well, what does the customer need? What's the value proposition of what we're developing? And what is the business value of that idea? Markets are analyzed, competitor analysis is performed, market segments are clearly better understood. Hopefully you have your go-to market identified and communicated. Your customer benefits are understood, and that all plays into your positioning and your messaging as part of a strategic platform when you eventually launch your product, and also leading up to the launch of your product. Eventually, engineering starts generating and evaluating solutions, including project uncertainties. You confirm your direction, your value proposition and feasibility are better understood. And then design controls are put in place. And these are good engineering practices. You demonstrate the evidence that supports that your product is safe and it's effective based on the intended use or the indications of use. So overall, it's quite comprehensive and it engages almost everyone in an organization. And we have gates. Gates are often structured throughout this process to evaluate and make decisions, quite often what are called go or no-go decisions to move forward, because product development is a costly activity. Now, I like this slide. This slide is adapted from a company called Xeros Limited, and they develop surgical equipment, and they've developed a commercialization model that runs in parallel with the product development process. Here on the left, we have this arrow pointing down. These are the major product development phases. They have developed a commercialization framework that based on 7 stages or 6 stages. And here you can see all the various activities that they employ throughout these stages. And this engages your technical teams, your R&D teams, legal, regulatory, commercial, and it really is, these frameworks are really helpful because product development and product commercialization is complex and it involves multidisciplinary teams to ensure that you get your formula right. In fact, commercialization, it touches almost every facet of a company that you can think of, whether these are regulatory governed processes and controls or not. But basically, nobody is spared in an organization to participate in one way or another to launch a product. It creates an excitement internally, it creates an excitement externally, but you really have to have a solid plan in place to ensure that you have a sound strategy, you are prepared, and that you can execute according to the expectations of the marketplace and your organization, as well as patients. So the big question is where do you start? Now, a lot of early stage organizations or startups, they may begin with what we call a business canvas model. Many of you in the audience today may have some familiarity with these business canvas models that allows you to more or less document your big picture in as simple as a one-pager. Other organizations that are larger, that are more complex, that may have multiple products and deeper pockets, they may engage in a more formal process of developing strategies and tactics and then executing them and evaluating them on an annual basis. But whether you're using a business canvas model or a formal strategic plan and implementation model, all of these organizations, no matter who you are and where you are, they are performing a thorough market opportunity assessments, such as defining the problem that you are solving and your value proposition, identifying your target customers and what is your go-to market, understanding your competitive landscape and your strengths and weaknesses in that landscape, and all of this plays into your strategy, all right? So the market opportunity assessment is critical in defining your strategy, and then eventually you're going to develop roadmaps on how to get there and how to execute flawlessly. And we're going to focus on the competition and segmentation. And we're going to do that because they really are important. Competitive analysis helps you determine the impact that you will have on a market, and it informs you of your value proposition. The market segmentation exercises, it helps you identify distinct market segments that are very unique and maybe very different from other market segments, and it informs your go-to strategy of your total addressable market. I also chose the competitive and market segmentation exercises today because you often hear from venture capital leaders, if they know more about the competition than you do, or they know more about how the market that you are playing in is segmented than you do, then the deal is done. So these are really important. And I think no matter where you are in developing a product, it may be going into a venture capital opportunity, or it may be partnerships and collaborations with third-party companies. You really need to know your competitive framework. You really need to know your markets that you're playing in and the market that you are going after at the launch of your product. And I want to share with you a great paper that was written up by, came out of actually Rotman's School of Business in collaboration with Harvard and industry leaders. It's called The Playbook for Strategy. And in this very short paper, they talk about the heart of a winning strategy, which is largely based on 5 questions that you need to answer. What's your winning aspiration? Where you're going to play in a market? How are you going to win? What management systems are required to execute your strategy? And what capabilities must be in place? Competitive analysis and market segmentation helps you answer 2 of these 5 fundamental questions that you need to answer. And if you can't answer these questions, then you are in trouble. So we're going to focus on competitive analysis. That will help us understand how you will win, and market segmentation helps us answer the questions of where you're going to play in the market. So I'm now going to move on to talk about competitive frameworks as well as market segmentation models. Before I do that, is there any questions from the group that I can answer or we can delve into? Okay. Thank you. I just ask you all, don't be shy. All questions are great questions. Please feel free just to holler out, and feel free to interrupt me. It makes for a better presentation. So I'll continue moving forward with competition. All right.
Oh, sorry. There's a question in the chat from Lydia that says, "Is Canada a right place for creating innovative products in sense of fairness?"
Oh, absolutely. I read an article recently that there are, of course, proportionately, there are a lot more medical device companies, for example, in the US as compared to Canada, even if you look at it like on a per capita perspective. But I think that the way that our world operates today, I believe that there are, you can really start and operate an organization anywhere around the world, generally speaking. I still think that Canadian companies still have a high hurdle when it comes to seeking venture capital investment and acquiring global talent. That being said, Canada is an excellent country to start a global organization. There are a lot of great companies that have already set that trend. There will continue to be great companies setting that trend. And I think that there are just a lot of things that you need to consider to decide where are you going to make your home. Great question.
Sorry,
okay.
Sorry, another question from the audience, Nick, is which report? I think Sarah is asking about the report that you are referring to that mentioned per capita more medical device companies exist in the US?
Oh, I will have to go into my Google folders and get where that one is. But I did read that today.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Right. All right, so let's move on to competition. One of my favorite topics. It drives innovation and it can build spirit, but if you do not pay attention to the competition, it can spell your demise. You know, we perform these assessments for a variety of reasons. It informs our value proposition and our competitive advantage. And it really is critical to be able to identify a competitor and determine the potential impact and to strategically maneuver accordingly. In fact, you know, you really need to pay attention to what kind of competitors are out there. It could be a company that offers the same or similar product, a company that offers a substitute of your product. It could be a company with a related competency. It can also be status quo. Don't forget that. There are some innovations that it may be complex to operationalize based on the stakeholder environment, based on perhaps, as an example, interoperability issues and so forth. That's why there's a lot of attention on these issues as we change and evolve our healthcare environment. But status quo is not uncommon. It's basically to say, this is a great innovation, we love it, but this is too painful to implement, and we're just going to stay the way we're doing things for now until you can bring down your some barriers and we can succeed. So don't forget about status quo. Why do we do it? Look, we all know that a one-product company is rare or short-lived if you're performing well in the marketplace. Every competitor have their own aspirations. They probably know more about you than you know about them. And that should keep you all on your toes. And competitive analysis positions you to anticipate market entry of competitor products, how they're going to impact you, how do you develop winning strategies to win in a marketplace and to establish that competitive advantage and ultimately succeed. That's why we do that. In the biopharmaceutical and the medical device space, there are a number of different competitive assessments that we can perform to make our organization, to position our organizations competitively and successfully, and to also succeed with discussions with collaborators and venture capital. You got to know your stuff. And these are the common assessments that we perform: market performance, pipeline funnel assessments, competitor matrix assessment, and what's called the strategy analysis assessment. And I'll share with you some examples of each of these types of assessments. Market performance, it's simple. You're measuring the performance of a market. It's simple. These types of assessments can illustrate not only your competitor performance, but you could identify market leaders and how they're trending. And you can capture trends. Could be a 2-year, 3-year, or a 5-year trend is applicable. And usually these performance analyses are illustrated in bar charts, linear charts, or pie charts. And there's a number of ways in which you can perform these creatively. We're not going to focus on this one today, but they're fairly straightforward. This is the competitive funnel. I like this. The competitive funnel, unlike the market performance assessment, is they help you identify products and classes of products that are in development. They're not on the market yet. And it's a good review as a starting point. It can help you identify those customers that keep you up at night. They're coming down the pipeline. They may be launching their product in 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3 years out, but it could have a major impact on your organization. So this really positions you to prioritize on who to pay attention to. I have performed these assessments. This is an example of some work that I did in the past when we were developing a drug for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. for lymphoblastic leukemia. And I know most of the examples we're going to look at today are medical device examples, but I will put up a few pharmaceutical examples because I think it's good to get a perspective on what different industries do and what these assessments look like. This one here shows, phase 1 in the left, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial programs. It shows you, if you look at the table of content here, it shows you the different classes of drugs that are emerging. And if you look inside the funnel, it gives you the name of the company, the name of the product that's in development, what stage they're in, and you can call out certain products and in any way that's creative. I like this slide because it always tells us what is being developed and what's coming and what we may be facing in the future. The next one is a competitor matrix. I find this one of the most valuable competitive assessment tools. It allows you to do a deep dive on those companies and their products that keep you up at night. It allows you to differentiate and understand how are these products differentiated. It can inform product development and informs your competitive advantage. Typically, it's done in the illustration that you see below. You can have your product compared against your competitors, X, Y, and Z, and you can compare them against a number of attributes that are really important in regards to how these products are uptaked in the real world. So here's an example. We're going to talk about mandibular splints a lot. It's a fun subject, but mandibular splints are devices that are used to treat sleep apnea. Sleep apnea can be a very, very serious condition. And this is an example of a competitor developed the product, and now they're assessing how their product stacks up against all the other competitors against these attributes that you see here on the left. The materials, are they CPAP compatible? This is all very important for the customer. Does it allow your lips to close? Does it allow for speech? And by assessing these products, you can very clearly see which products clearly have a competitive advantages, which don't. But you can also see how a analysis like this can help inform the ongoing development and improvements of any products that you may already have on hand. So I find that this competitive matrix model informs product development. It allows you to understand your competitive advantages or disadvantages, and really helps you get a good footing on what you have and what you don't have as you enter a marketplace. Speaking of sleep apnea, there is also these emerging mobile apps that can be used with, for example, positive airway pressure devices. This is another product that's used to treat sleep apnea. And you could see here now that these companies are now including apps that allow your care to be addressed through the cloud, and thus treat people, collect data on how people are doing with these treatments prospectively versus taking notes, seeing your doctor every 3 months, and perhaps course correcting in how we treat these patients after a period of time. Now we can do this in real time. It's really quite incredible. And this is just another example of how these competitive matrix assessment tools can be used to assess the strengths and the weaknesses of the different products, the mobile app products that are now used for positive airway pressures. One last example, this company is called Exalis, based in Toronto. This is a pharmaceutical example. They're developing a therapeutic to treat neurodegenerative diseases. Very exciting compound called OXD4. Well, here, this compound is compared to some standard of care treatments like tetrabenazine, antisense oligos, and neurotransmitter modulating drugs. And here they're comparing it against these attributes. Are they available in an oral form? Are there minimal side effects? Can you regain function and so forth? And you could just see why they are so excited and why any venture capital investor would also be excited in speaking to the leaders of this organization. I'm going to move now to the last example of competitive analyses. This is called the strategic landscape or the strategic analysis matrix. It allows you to evaluate the potential impact of strategies. What are their threats? What's their strategic advantage? And this is what it looks like. I was once developing a drug for the treatment of lung cancer. And my boss used to always ask me, who keeps you up at night and why? And I would always pull out this slide just to discuss my understanding from a strategic perspective. This shows you the various companies that are developing products in the same space we were developing products. It shows you their probability of achievement, but also the potential impact in dollars. And you can create your own variables or your own scale of dollars, depending on what kind of a product and market you are playing in. I found this very powerful because it allows you to really pick and choose those companies in the top right quadrant here that really keep you up at night and that worries you. And it allows you to manage your resources quite smartly on who to pay attention to and who not to pay attention to. This company, BrainFX in Toronto, we're developing a digital assessment tool to diagnose brain disorders. They performed this kind of a strategic matrix, but a little bit differently, different variables on your X and Y axis, but what they showed here of how they're differentiated from all other methods that are being used today to diagnose brain disorders. And they put themselves as the new approach that's both technology driven and both insight and strategy driven. What a nice job they did. And I'm sure this proved to be very helpful as they were raising funds to develop their business and their development strategy. So as a wrap up on competitive analysis, be astute about your threats, know who, when, and how to pay attention to these threats. There are a number of tools that you can use. I like performing all 4 of the assessments, but you really have to decide what you need to know and then pick and choose of all these tools, what can best be applied to help bolster your understanding of the competitive landscape. And the competitive landscape really is critical to inform your key strategic decisions. I don't know how you can develop a strategy without performing any of these landscape assessment tasks. They're important, they're critical, they will strengthen your organization, and they will better position you to make the right decisions with your strategy as you go forward to launch your product. This is the last section. I'm about, I would say maybe 3 minutes behind, maybe 4. So we're almost on time. I'm pleased. I will make up some time. Before I wrap up this section and before we go on our break, are there any questions on competitive analysis tools, frameworks, anything related to the competition?
And Nick, there is one question from Greg, the audience, and yes, he's asking, when analyzing a competitive matrix, would there be a point where you determine a market to be too saturated with competition?
Well, a competitive matrix, I would say task may help you determine that. There are some markets that are, I would say they're called crowded, but it really depends what market share various companies from that crowded market has. So, for example, you could have 6 competitors, of which 3 have, I would say, the lion's share of the market. Well, you might look at those other competitors as low-hanging fruit, not to be of a great concern, provided that you have an innovation that's exciting and that you think gives you a competitive edge and where you can take market share. So the real answer to that question is, I think it depends. It depends on, it depends on the number of competitors. It depends on what proportion of those competitors have what proportion market share in the marketplace. And you may also be looking at various trends. Some of these competitors, for example, may be coming off patent, and there may be generics coming in, such as in the biopharmaceutical world. So there's a number of questions that you need to ask that can help answer that question. And it really is case specific from company and product to product.
Awesome.
That's a really good question. Really good question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. I also see Jamie has a question. Go ahead, Jamie. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, great. Thanks. You talked a little bit about sort of that relationship with, in terms of appeasing venture capital firms if they're sort of backing your company or project. I've heard a lot of sort of mixed reviews on venture capitalists. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the competition that often exists between the company itself and the venture capital firm backing it. Because there's often a lot of issues that go down with respect to that relationship when the venture capitalist, in terms of their agenda, sucks your business dry. So we've talked about sort of intra-market competition, but what about competition between venture capitalists and your company?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a little bit out of scope, right, from what we're talking about today. And I use the term venture capital a little bit more generically to define a funder. It could be an angel investor. It could be just private investor. It could be venture capital firm. I think all of them have these kinds of questions on your strategy. How well do you know the competition? How well do you know your market and the segmentation of your market and your strategy? When it comes to venture capital competition, I can probably talk more about venture capital to venture capital competition, but not competition between your venture capital firm and your company. What I do know is that it's a serious business. A lot of these companies seeking Series B and C funding are seeking 10, 20, 30 million dollars. And this may be the beginning of multiple tranches of funding based on the milestone development of your product. Venture capital firms, when they pony up 10, 15, 20, 30 million and more, they have a say. And I think that the key here, maybe the best way to answer your question, the key is you have to find the right cultural fit between your organization and what you want to be and the type of funder that you are seeking, who they are and what they want to be and how you work together. I do offer seminars on these subject matters, and we can expand on this conversation more broadly, maybe a break, but to go any further right now is going to take time from market segmentation. But Jamie, I have to tell you something. I love your question. It's a loaded question. It's a good question. And it's something that people need to pay attention to.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Appreciate the answer.
Great. Thank you. All right. Okay. Market segmentation. I'm going to our workshop at approximately 7 o'clock. Will be on market, at approximately 6 o'clock, we'll be on market segmentation. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes on this and 15 minutes max, and then we will make up for the time. So thank you for your patience. Market segmentation is the process of identifying unique segments of an addressable market. It's usually driven by qualitative or quantitative data. And there's a variety of ways that you can do it, but irrespective of which way you can do it, the goal of market segmentation is to identify distinct segments of customers that make up a total addressable market that really you may play in with your innovation or your product that you're developing. Similar to my point about make sure that you know about competition more than your funder, or including market segmentation, you need to know these terms. You may be asked questions about your total addressable market, your served addressable market, or your target market. And to answer, questions properly when you're in a room full of analysts and investors, you need to know what they're talking about. So your target market is your go-to market where you're launching your product initially. Your served addressable market are the segments that align best with the value proposition and capabilities of your product and organization. And your total addressable market are all the potential markets and or customers that may apply to your product, perhaps not immediately, but in the future. But most of these early stage companies cannot play in all spaces. You start in a smaller segment, you succeed, and then you expand your segments and you grow from there. And that's typically the strategies. Market segmentation, we do it for a variety of reasons. To examine the opportunities across the segments, choose the right one. It can inform critical activities like R&D and resourcing, targeting and positioning. It allows for targeted strategies, and it allows you to communicate succinctly about your product and how your product benefits your target customers. And it allows you to answer many critical questions that you see here. And in most, I would say, business meetings with collaborators, or whether you're pitching to a funder and they're performing a due diligence exercise, they are going to ask you these questions. And if you can't answer them, then you have a dilemma. So we're going to talk about some models that can help you do that. So you can perform market segmentation in a variety of different ways. I'm going to talk about two methodologies that have proved to be very successful for many organizations. Generally, both of these models, it's accomplished in a stepwise manner. It can be done, numerous approaches can be used. They both use what are called variables to help create the groups or the segments. And these variables help you identify distinct segments. And all of these segments make up your total addressable market. Let's look at one example, the single cascade model. I like this model here. This is a company that was developing a medical imaging device. And this is just an example of how they used geographic, demographic, psychographic, and behavioral variables to help hone in on the type of customer that they are going to focus on when they launch their product. This would be the target market here at the bottom, and the totality of what you see in this triangle is your total addressable market. In this case, they were focusing on just the European market. You could have global as well as another part on top of this. Here's another company. They were developing a product for hypertension. So this is a pharmaceutical example. And now there's about 50 million hypertension patients in the US at the time that this was done. It was understood that there is about 10.2 million that are high risk for a cardiovascular event, about 3 million that are at high risk for a cardiovascular event that are not at their treatment goal. And then there were approximately 20% of that 3 million that have private insurance. This is a really brilliant way that shows how market segmentation can also help you forecast and defend your forecast. So you can use this model to say, at product launch, we are going to focus on the high-risk cardiovascular patients not at goal with private insurance. And this is believed to be the low-hanging fruit. This is believed to be the segment that they should tap into right after launch. And then from there, and through their development program, they would focus on broadening their market and looking at other subpopulations of the hypertension market. I like this example, because on the right-hand side, They also explain what sources of information they used to come up with these figures that you see here. It's a very credible way of showing your total addressable market, your go-to market, and how you've used the thought process in defining what your potential is financially. Quite exciting. Okay, I'm now going to wrap up, and we're going to do our workshop on this one. So this is the strategic market grid model. It is a richer model, and it allows you to characterize your market segments, unlike these models, which is really an identification of market segments with some quantification of those segments. This model can help you characterize the market segments as well as quantify the market segments. It's really a 2x2 strategic grid that you can use. I'm going to give you an example of how simple this is. And you're all going to do this exercise, so please pay attention. All right, so you use a 2x2 grid, and the first step is you create variables, and you plot your variables to help define observable and measurable characteristics of segments that are differentiated from each other. So I'm going to give you an example. This came from my company that I led for 6.5 years as a CEO. We sold sample digestion equipment. It dissolves solid materials for multi-element analysis. This equipment is not only used in pharmaceuticals to analyze small molecules, but it's used in agriculture, food, environmental, metals and alloys, and the mining market, whether you're a precious metal or a base metal. And we've also identified all the different laboratories that purchase this kind of equipment. So basically everything inside these, the light gray areas here represents our total addressable market. Every sample digestion equipment that is sold in the marketplace is more or less serving either any of these industry segments or any of these buyer segments that you include here. This is an example of hyperdyslipidemia for the development of a statin. All patients are categorized into low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. And they are either treated by a family doctor, cardiologist, endocrinologist, and internal medicine. Basically, every person that has experiencing hyperdyslipidemia belongs somewhere in this matrix that you see here. And that's what brings us to the next step. So the next step is we would then identify distinct market segments and each of these segments are grouped based on similarities within those market segments. So for example, in the sample digestion market segmentation matrix model, I've identified 4 distinct market segments here, and I'll show you how these are populated in a moment. And in hyperdyslipidemia, we've also identified 5 distinct market segments. We move on to the third step, and that is where you can now characterize and quantify these segments. In the case of the sample digestion market, I presented this in a due diligence exercise to investors who asked, please help us understand who is your competition and where do they play in the marketplace. And we use this tool to show them, well, this is the total addressable market that you see here. And we have certain technologies have a niche. Fire assay, for example, is applied to gold. Fusion, hot block, and microwaves are applied to base metals and alloys. And microwaves and hot blocks are largely applied to food, agriculture, and pharmaceuticals. This is incredibly important because it helps inform where we need to spend our resources on the competitors that worry us the most. And because these competitors play across different market segments, you really need to pay attention to which segment are we focusing on. Hyperdyslipidemia Well, less than 45% of patients are controlled with diet and exercise. 33% of patients are at target with well-controlled therapies, and then a smaller subset of patients are not at target, or they require maybe multimodality treatment. These are powerful, powerful segmentation models that can help inform how you look at the market, how you make decisions, how you build your strategies, and also how you use this understanding when you're talking with your collaborators and partners, as well as your investors. It doesn't always have to look this way. Sometimes we perform market segmentation models, and it could look like this. This is a company of Medela Health in Toronto. They're developing a contact lens to measure glucose and other biomarkers. And they just show that they can perform internal market segmentation models, as you see here, but it doesn't always have to be expressed that way. It can be illustrated in many different and powerful ways for you to get across the message that you know the markets, and you know where you're playing, and you know the value and the benefit of your technology across the different segments of a marketplace. One thing for sure is good market segmentation allows you to target better, position better, and achieve optimized outcomes. And that's our session on market segmentation. And so before you go on a break, I want to, this is the exercise we're going to do, and I'm going to reiterate this when we come back. And I'd like to, I know I'm about 7 minutes late, so if I can buy you 5 minutes and we can start at 6:05, I think that we would be in really good shape here, okay? So this is what we're going to do. We're going to be broken down into different Zoom teams. So there will be a participative team. We need one scriber and one presenter, all right? We're going to do a case study workshop using the 2x2 market segmentation model. When you break out, you're going to spend 10 minutes reviewing a reading assignment on the web, so it's all accessible to everyone. You're going to spend 20 minutes to build a segmentation model. We're going to come back at 6:45 and spend about 5 to 10 minutes as a group to review maybe 1 or 2 examples. There's not going to be enough time for everybody to present. And then I am going to review a benchmark example of this exercise. All right. So here's the background. New company is formed. You got your first product, and it's an oral mandibular splint to treat sleep apnea. You're meeting with a venture capital firm, and they have asked you some questions on the marketplace, and they want you to present a thorough understanding of the sleep apnea marketplace where you are playing in with your mandibular splint. Your assignment is as follows, right? You're going to review the sleepapnea.org website, right? This is the website, and it's got all the information you need at your fingertips, or a lot of information. You're going to use the 2x2 segmentation model. I've provided you a template, and you're going to consider the following variables. I'm making this easy for you. Consider looking at the different types of sleep apnea, and consider looking at the severity of sleep apnea. All patients will fall under these variables if you choose to use those variables, but you could use other variables. You can access any other website, all right, online. And then, so I've given you a template here. It's 3 steps. Identify your variables. Identify what you think are the unique segments. And number 3, if time permits, okay, if time permits, see if you can characterize how these segments are different. And that's more or less what the exercise is going to be. You all have a working template. This will be in the control of the scriber, and you can change this up. You can make it longer, smaller, less columns, less rows, or more. But the idea here is to get a sense of how to do this exercise and not to get it perfect, because you won't. But just enjoy this exercise. It's rich and it will help you in the future. So Ahmed and everyone, would we be able to reconvene at 6:05 and take like a 25-minute break?
Yes, I think that would work very well with the attendees, Nick.
Okay, all right, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for the excellent questions. And we will have 15-minute discussion after your breakouts, so we will have much more time for great questions. I'm going to review this again. I'll see you all at 6:05.
Perfect.